Now, um, I normally do these straight after I finish editing the ep and all that sort of stuff, so I thought I'd do it a few days later. This obviously starts off with the nightmare, kind of foreshadowing what becomes, sort of thing. Um, and it's obviously the foreshadowing of the assassin. Now, at this very time, I didn't actually. It was more of a. The idea that she was going to lose Dawnbreaker was from because of Meridia, and it still does work into that. That she turns Centaurus at this time of the night is turned into a vampire, and the blade is taken from her from Meridia. It just disintegrates back into what's that realm called? I don't know. I think it's called the Evergleam. No, it's a different one. The Colour of Rooms, and disappears. She loses it because she betrays Meridia by turning one of her friends into a weapon of Malik Bol, using Malik Bol's power. Blah blah. But as we know in the Assassins chapter, he actually comes and he grabs it, and that causes it to disappear by having something of Malik Bol touch the blade, and it shows her to be seriously unworthy of the blade, and it basically disintegrates as soon as he touches it. But she wakes up, can't find the blade, and like I said, it's obviously because Centauros has been turned into a vampire by this time, and she has lost the right in Meridia's eyes to hold the blade. It's as simple as that, really. She goes looking for it, finds Lyris still up. I just saw Lyris up at the fire, and I thought, why not I make a little scene with it? She blushes a bit because they kind of have a little, like little flirting match with each other, where basically Lyris calls her beautiful, and anyone's gonna blush if someone calls you beautiful or handsome, whatever the fuck. That sort of thing. So this was just a spare the moment sort of thing I like to do, because I want the story to feel alive. There's actually there's just encounters with people and stuff like that. Ragni finds the Stormcloaks has arrived, and with that she knows that Sigurd has arrived. And she's got some beef with Sigurd, especially not being here during the attack of Morthal, but she's obviously arrived, and we'll see a lot more of that later. And she finds Vema, sort of over the dead Daedra, talking with Phalion. They're having a discussion sort of thing. Phalion's he's a mage, heavy in the Daedric arts and sort of thing. And, Vema's basically donated the body of her dead Orion, or Arions, or whatever the hell they're called. I think that's the Golden Saint ones. To Valiant, and have a discussion about the other ones, like, the Dark Seducers and the Golden Saints. So, it's as simple as that. And she's also obviously here to find out what's happened to the Dawnbreaker. Vami hasn't been told exactly the full truth, but she has been told to return to Meridia, and that will inspire a bit more in the later story. Of course, with what's happened. First, I got to say sorry about what's happened. It's changes the story up a lot, especially if you like Serana. But not many people did, actually. Funny enough, I got told someone liked Serana until she was in my story. Maybe because she is a lot more compassionate and I guess a little bit more forgiving in my story. But anyway, so as simple as that. Vami says, "I can't remain. I need to go back to Meridia. I am still her servant." Blah blah blah. And she'll no doubt will be told what's happened by Meridia. And by the time she gets back to the Dragonborn, obviously things have greatly changed. I did think of having Felion join the team after this battle, but I think guarding his ward's a bit more important, and also rebuilding Morthal would be a bit more important to him than fighting the Dragonborn. It could happen later on, of course. Felion's going to be needed for a much later date, from turning vampires back into mortals, sort of thing, which would be useful for maybe a character that we all know about and stuff like that. But essentially, this is what this was. She's trying to find what happened to Dawnbreaker, and Vami's like, "Yep, I know something's gone wrong. I'll get back to you later," pretty much. Now, at this point of Ragni's story, she has no idea how Sigurd's rocked up or why she's rocked up, blah blah blah. We know a bit more of the contractor story, that she's got a lot more in-depth than that, of course. But she's here to basically do what she's always meant to do. I guess Sigurd became a very temperamental person, and I guess I'll talk about this a bit. I imagine if I was a steadfast soldier that had my shit together, and then my world went cracking and falling down, I would also break with it too. And she's had this, I think it was episode 19 or 18, she had a conversation with Centauros, but Centauros told her to protect Ragni, and of course that's an oath that she's obviously failed a little bit at, and she's ready to take it again and take the knee and beg for forgiveness. And this is kind of what it is. It's really, it's her sort of realigning herself with Ragni, kind of really in this moment to really prove herself that she will 100%, do what she was sent here to do. I kind of made her to be a commander of the Stormcloak forces and also a close friend of the Dragonborn. And I guess the story writes itself. I just go along with it. But she's obviously, she knows she's fucked up. She knows she's, not done the right thing. And this right here is kind of Ragni really putting the foot down, releasing a bit of the dragon. She's like, I'm not tolerating your shit anymore. Okay, I will not tolerate it. You will do as you're meant to do. You will do what I tell you to do. And if you cannot, you will go back to Windhelm. She really kind of puts the foot down here from this, the younger sister kind of role to the, the young friend, the more, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? The younger sister sort of role. To becoming the older sister, the sort of commander, the dragon, as she's meant to. And, of course, I do like having Ragni kind of pop that out. She's a lot more of a sensitive, compassionate character at this time in the story. And I do like seeing the dragon come out. Of course, what's happened at the end of episode 20, there'll be a lot more of the dragon to face much later on. There'll be a bit more of a crueler tone to her, no doubt. Because the first thing we deal with when we lose someone we love is the shock of it, then the grief of it, and the sadness, and the anger of it, and we let that monster out, and it kind of turns us into something different, because something that we allow to come out for maybe an hour or so when we're angry, we let it take too much daylight, and it becomes our daylight. But yeah, this is just essentially, Sigurd basically taking the oath again, taking the knee, telling Ragnar she's ultimately serious, and basically swearing her life to her, pretty much, Then she never bent the knee to Ragnar, she swore to help her, and, if she'd help the Stormcloaks in the later on, but this is kind of an oath of Sigurd's, not really of the Stormcloaks. This is her oath, this is her allegiance, this is her last chance, this is her wish, this is her promise, sort of thing, and this is kind of her solemn swear. Yeah, that's what we're going to say about that. I mean, like I said, Ragni is a very compassionate person. She forgives, not really I guess she does, because I guess at the end of the day, she doesn't like what Sigurd's done. She really doesn't, but she loves her. She sees her as a sister, as one of her best friends, as a member of her family. And it's really hard to kind of hate someone that you love, as your family, even if they have treated you the wrong way. Sometimes it's impossible to see, it's impossible to hate them. You just yearn to give them a chance. And this is Ragni's last chance for Sigurd. This is you do what you need to do. You protect me. You don't betray me. You don't hurt me, or you can fuck right off back to Windhelm, sort of moment. And she's deadly serious about it, even though she seems to sort of really get over it really quickly. She's just really glad she has a sister back in a way, I guess, because she is 19, 20-ish, she's young, she's sort of naive, and she's just, if the sister wants to come back to her, she's going to crack the shits a little bit to put the foot down, but she's going to basically give her a big hug afterwards. It's like, welcome back. And this is that moment for Ragni. I did a little poll a while ago asking who more the mother figure is in the Dragonborn's team, and I actually see kind of it as Minerva, as more of the compassionate sort of mother figure to Ragni, where Cecilia is kind of like the tough love sort of mother figure to Ragni, which might come in handy with what's happened. She might need a bit more Minerva on her side with what she's going to go through, and I've always seen Minerva as like kind of the mother of the group, really, in a way, where Tonrak's like the older brother, Sigurd and Centaurus are like the best friends, and Ragni's the daughter of them all, sort of like the one. They're all older, they're all experienced over her, and I don't know. I've always seen Minerva as kind of the mother of the group, sort of that charming, beautiful, witty, but nurturing high of the woman that she is. She's like 80 plus years old, so she's lived a bit. But again, I've always seen Minerva as more of the mother, not just of Ragni in a way, but also the team. And here she convinces Ragni to go to the wedding, even though Ragni believes she won't, because the Legion hasn't arrived, and there's her fallen to bury, and there's the injured to look after, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, Minerva's like, you need to go. You need to find some happiness. You've been through some serious stuff. You need to go, my dear, and have a look. Enjoy something beautiful, which, you look back at it now, you probably think, maybe you shouldn't have. Maybe you shouldn't have. Because, as we'll get to the very end of it, if Ragni didn't go, horrible things wouldn't have happened. Now, I am an Australian, as is very well known, through my voice and my very horrible attitude. Well, I wouldn't say attitude, I'd just say raw bluntness. I like to put a bit of humour in this, and I laughed at this line. Of course, I made it, but I thought it was quite, Minerva's quite of a cheeky kind of girl. She's a mischievous kind of elf. And I like this whole entire thing. It's the first time I think I actually start using the word arse.
Doubt. I'll wake Tonrak to help you. And Sigurd. Remember to protect her, yes? Not bring her harm, or I'll leave a little scar on the side of your ass. One that'll be a lightning burn.
I should probably be taking you with me.
And if she brought Minerva with her, she might have stood a better chance against what hides in the shadows, or maybe Minerva also would have died, which would have been a great tragedy to the entire team. Because I like to see her as kind of the... I like to see her as the kind of the Katara of Team Dragonborn, like, Katara from Avatar The Last Airbender. And, yeah. Now, from my previous videos, I've always talked about how I loved Arcane. And I know I use AI, and the people of Forgy are very opposed against it and so a lot of their fans. And I really want... And so, I'm really enemy number one over there, but I'm only one guy. I don't have a full production team. I'm not, rich. If I was, I'd probably have a team of people creating this just for the sole enjoyment of doing it. But I'm just one guy who can do one thing, and AI helps me make this, including the music, which people might not like, and that's more than fine. But again, I do not and will not ever make money from this. That's the word I'm looking for, whatever the YouTube thing is. And again, I wouldn't even earn anything with 100 views. So I really wanted to add music videos like what Arcane did with a lot of their stuff, with either their fight scenes or their storytelling. They added sort of music into that. And I really want to do that myself and sort of pay homage to the burial and the previous fight which happened. Does anyone realise what that dragon is yet? I haven't got any comments of that. There's an important... dragon's important to the story. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to do a music video, and this was kind of to bury him. And I think I did 2 of this. This one right here, where it ends off with Ragni overlooking the grave and cutting her hand and giving her blood to those that gave her blood for her, which I thought was quite ceremonial. I was like, yeah, that's nice. And of course, the one later on when she walks back to Solitude. I'm going to miss the Nightingale. I'm going to miss her. But there will be a character that rocks up that kind of replaces her, that kind of reflects Ragni's current behaviour at the time. One that Cecilia knows from her time. Yes, I played a bit of her on my Oblivion remastered channel, and I'm going to change her from an Imperial half-blooded Dunmer to an actual Dunmer. But yeah, she'll rock up and kind of replace the Nightingale in a way, and all that. Now here, the Jarl kind of forebodes of what's going to happen, and she kind of, she's kind of hinting at the things that may come, which of course, the team's young and they're hopeful. They want Ragnar to go and have a good night, but obviously not knowing what fate has in store for her. And, they're just like, go and have a good night. And she's kind of giving these sort of words of dark wisdom and unknowing what will happen later on. It's tragic, of course, but no good story doesn't have a bit of tragedy in it. Of course, there's a funny bit where, they're having a conversation, and then the Nightingale threatens to shoot Sigurd in the other arse. And Ragnar's like, she won't be able to sit down for weeks with you guys around. And then Tonrak's like, hey, if you two get into a fight, I'm picking Sigurd's side. She's only one out of you that doesn't want to kill me, and she's a cool chick, so you're on your own. And then, Minerva's like, oh, you're a damn fool. I can't take you anywhere out in public. And I like the whole sort of, the chemistry of the group, which I've now thrown into the fire. I've just ripped all those pages out and thrown it all into the fire, which I'm going to miss, but hopefully I'll be able to write it back in there and hopefully get the team back on. I don't know. I don't know, man. Honestly, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing next apart from Centaurus' story. Hopefully they'll give me some time to kind of figure out what's happened to the Dragonborn. Now, of course, I did release this little song a few weeks ago, kind of foreboding what was to happen. At the time, I didn't even have a name for it, what the hell was going to happen. I knew what was going to happen to Serana, but I didn't know what I was going to call it until obviously the song kind of gave me the idea of it. Because Ashes of My Destiny is kind of like the whole foreboding, the ruin of, the hero. And then I realised Serana becomes Ashes. And I was like, well, there, right, yeah. And it even brings more meaning to the song, because if you listen to it during this point over the bridge, there's a certain thing you'll hear.
The world demands my sacrifice, and love is always the price.
That right there. Love is always the price. And we find that out with what happens at the very end. It kind of forebodes what is to happen on such a beautiful night, brought to such dread. I like this conversation. It starts with Tonrak being like, dude, really? You stop it here? When you could have stopped it when we were leaving Morthal, so we didn't have to track up the goddamn mountain with mud and rain. And then obviously the Nightingale makes fun of him about his fear of boats and being drowned. And he's like, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. And then they have a little the little Nightingale, and which I'm going to miss. I'm honestly going to miss her. And then Tonrak having a bit of a joke with each other. And I'm surprised no one's brought this up, man. I mean, obviously I thought there'd be like a lot more Avatar fans in this. There's an Avatar quote there, and I laughed when I put it in there with the Nightingale. She says it directly right here, pretty much. And all that sort of stuff. But we have a little briefing, and basically once this is all done, Ragnar thanks Valeria for helping her, and basically Tonrak decides, yep, I've come here, I'm going to go back to Minerva, I'm going to help her out, and I'll see you guys later. Basically, Karsten stays, the Nightingale stays, because she's close friends with Ragnar, and obviously it's not just that, but she sees an opportunity. There's a wedding going on, there's a lot of rich people around, and there could be something to gain while she's in town, but also she's out there looking out for Ragnar. And of course, Minerva's Dremora stays because he's ordered to, and Lydia, I guess. Lydia sticks around. I did think about killing her in this story, but I didn't want to kill too many notable players, especially ones so beloved by the Skyrim, communities, like Lydia or Serana. Like, those are the two biggest picks when it comes to vanilla characters. I honestly wrote this to be like your typical Journeys of the Dragonborn story, kind of boring like a journal. When I made the Journeys of the Dragonborn, I didn't want them to be like overly cinematic or important. I wanted to feel like it was a journal being read by someone far into the future, which was a combination of all these characters' stories. They're reading the journals of Sigurd Berklaw 200 years later, and the stories of the Nightingale, or whatever, they're reading the journals of what's happened. That's what I wanted the Journeys of the Dragonborn to be. I wanted it to be, felt more like a journey that you're watching that could be read by a child 200 years into the future of, the Elder Scrolls universe, to the next great catastrophe and things like that. So it does obviously feel a lot, it's not as obviously big and crazy with cinematic stuff until the very end, where it kind of all falls into place. Things like that. But again, I just want to state that these chapters are kind of based on either an important character with an important story, and episodes are more of the life, the story of the character sort of thing. Things like that. Now, they walk in, they feel this cold, and they've felt it before, but it's the very opposite of what Ragni felt with her companions, but she feels the opposite, the cold, and again, the other person on the opposite side of this is also feeling that exact cold. It's that, like I said, it's just the opposite effect of her protectors. All these people, the only person there with her right now is obviously the Nightingale, and they both feel this extreme cold because they're both drawn to each other through fate. And the other person, well, he's not there to guard and protect the Dragonborn. He's there to, he brings great harm to the Dragonborn, so that's kind of his role in the story. That's why it feels cold for them and nobody else, because he's directly linked to them, but as a hostile threat, as we see much later on in the story. Especially to the Nightingale, she feels quite cold because his story is linked to ending hers. Um, yeesh. That was a late idea too, the whole death of the Nightingale. So it wasn't the whole Serana thing, that was from the start. But I think halfway through this, I'm not even sure at this point of making the story that I think the Nightingale was doomed to die. So I think at this time of me making this part, I think she was still very much planning on living through it. Now, episode 18, Serana, or 19 or one of them, she comes back to basically save Centauros. You know, she's gone for Sicilia to save Centauros, and that's where she's gone. And obviously, so Serana's left a message for the the barkeeper to basically, Jesus, that's distracting, to save Centauros. And while she's having a conversation, a strange man sits down beside her, unknowing to her of, well, the danger she poses. I did put him in episode 17 or 18, I think. He was there when Sigund went to see Centauros when she found it was greatly sick. When she made the oath to protect Ragni to Centauros, this is, he was in there. And they were setting up that story for a long time. Obviously, I probably should have mentioned this at the start, but this entire story came to be with the trouble I got myself into with the SDA mod, where I cloned the SDA voice actor's voice to use it for Serana. Obviously, it's not good either way. I just wanted to go with the idea is if you heard the character speak in game and fight in game, I wanted you to hear the character in the voices. Regardless, it's never a good thing, and that's obviously the reason why I never ever want to monetize these, because I don't make this for the money, and obviously be morally fucking incorruptibly wrong if I was accepting money from cloned voices. Even though they are in the game, it still doesn't make it right to earn money from someone else's voice, especially now that I also use AI to help me out with some of the music in the background. But here we go, the whole sheep and wolf's clothing has gotten pretty bloody close, and he's trying to charm the Dragonborn. This man's trying to charm her, trying to maybe take her away, for some, some more drinks and some private time, sort of things like adults will do at a bar naturally. Just like every other poor bastard, he gets refused and cock-blocked. But she pretty much spots what he is when he's talking with his fangs, and it might take him off guard a bit. She knows exactly what he is, and she's kind of heard the name before because she's been in the Bard's College. And she's been in the College of Winterhold, and she's talked to Minerva, and the Tharn family it's been dead for a couple hundred years, but it has a very large history, very much like the Targaryens of the Game of Thrones. Not so much the film The Dragon was, but there's such big in history and things like that. If only Ragni would have listened to Sigurd and her gut feeling. Sigurd might seem a bit overprotected, but there was a damn good reason for it. And obviously, Ragni got lost in the hope of the day and the greatness of the day, and kind of putting Sigurd in her place, that she didn't really listen to Sigurd, which obviously had some lasting consequences, because she had a really bad feeling about a certain person in the room, someone that that she felt was a great threat to the person she loved, and sort of. Ragni's changed over a bit. She knows it's a vampire, but she knows that vampires aren't all monsters. And she unfortunately thought that of the very one that is an absolute monster. She's been around vampires for a large part of her time in the story, and she's got some of the greatest ones around her. Minerva, Cecilia and Serana. And a great understanding of that they're not all evil. From her time as in the Dawnguard with Serana and that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, the time that she thought they weren't evil, they actually were. And, it might change her perspective on things again. She's kind of cursed to be with vampires, I guess. Kind of the story of the Dragonborn is wrapped around vampires. This is kind of nice. I set this up to have the Nightingale kind of dress her up and do some pretty makeup. Because, Topher, the fox, is quite a beautiful character, and she's dressed up all pretty and stuff to kind of get into the beds of the houses of nobles and steal their shit throughout her life. She's quite an attractive woman under that mask, and she can make herself look quite pretty, so she's got that talent where she can make the Dragonborn look quite beautiful. Because a lot of my female characters, I don't like to add makeup to them. Not even Minerva. Not even Sigurd or Ragni or Topher, when they have their hoods off, have any makeup on at all. Their lips, their cheeks, their eyeshadow, their everything doesn't actually work. So they've got no makeup on. Even Sigurd, I mean, she looks quite fair in complexion. That's probably because she's wearing fair skin complexion as her skin for CBBE, and it makes the lips look quite pink. But yeah, I just really kind of wanted to sort of shadow that, that the little bit of Topher's popping out with kind of making the Dragonborn look quite pretty in that, and even Sigurd kind of admires that. She's like, yeah, nice work. There must be some other secret talents you've got underneath that hood. Blah blah blah. But then obviously, Ragni wants her to stay because that's the closest thing she has to an older sister. Where I don't think she sees Topher as a sister, but more as a really close friend, someone she can really personally talk to. And I mean, it probably would have been a bit more. If at the time I knew that the Nightingale wasn't to die, it might have been it would have been a bit more ceremonial if it was actually the Nightingale talking to Ragni, kind of one last conversation. But it's just like, in life, you don't know, one day someone's in your life, and you get home and the cops knock on your door and tell you that the person you love is dead. It's just, you're not told, you're not warned, they're just gone. Sometimes it doesn't lead up to this glorious sort of, beautiful last ending moment. Sometimes it ends in an argument, and then you live the rest of your life with guilt in your heart for saying something that you regret, and you carry that to your grave. But yeah, I had no idea at this point. I mean, I was outside playing with my dogs when the idea of the Nightingale came into my head being carked alongside Serana. Honestly, there wasn't enough really Pentilius Oculatus security for the wedding, and of course I'm playing multiple different saves in this. Like, I think probably 6 or 7 different saves. Because I, unfortunately, by this time in my save, I was already done the wedding. Victoria's already dead and all that sort of stuff, so I had to go back and forth. But at this point, I could just have a guard stand there and have a conversation like he's guarding the door, blah, blah, blah. And basically, Ragni's guest was going to be Serana. But of course, she's kind of already in the Temple of the Divines, just underneath it with Centauros after saving his life by turning him into a vampire. And he mentions that he can't bring, she can't bring her friends in, like her guests, because they're not properly dressed. Can't bring the person hiding their face. Can't bring the big ass demon looking thing. Could probably bring the housecarl, but wouldn't really be a guest to be sitting in the housecarl section. I can't bring the Stormcloak trader because she's a trader. But conversations below back and forth, kind of like, this is my guest, I've chosen her, Victoria won't like it if you refuse me because I will not enter without her. And plus the whole idea that, the groom's side of the family are Stormcloak supporters, so that shouldn't be an issue, sort of thing. And eventually caves in, he's like, yeah, rightio, I don't want no bullshit, I'm only here to guard the Emperor's cousin's wedding. Go on in, don't cause any shit, and you're good to go. Now, I mean, the whole wedding thing, I mean, you only get to see the reception of it in the game. I mean, obviously there would have been some sort of private ceremony inside the Temple of the Divines where they get married and their families there, and you get the son's side on the right, or the groom's side on the right and the bride's side on the left, sort of thing. And I wanted to add some powerful people there because Victoria Vici would have, her hands in big ass pockets. Obviously, a lot of the Imperial aligned Jarls being the head of the East Empire Company in Solitude, so she'd have a lot of people there, especially like Maven and Imperial Jarls, and of course the Jarl of Solitude herself being there, since it's actually her city that's being placed in. She'd obviously be there. But I definitely want to put a couple notable people there, not just for this moment, but also for later on in the story. I kind of wanted to show Victoria Vici and I forgot his name actually getting married inside the temple. This is actually where I think Zarita and Rosella, I think her name was, were coming to get married before she got turned into a damn vampire. A lot of vampire things in this game. A lot. But I just really kind of wanted to show it off and have that moment where Rainy gets to see the wedding and the player gets to see the wedding, gets to see it actually take place, and there's some powerful people in there. There's some exiled Jarls, there's even the Riften, Stormcloak Riften Jarl, the original one, who's there. She's a guest to the brother of the groom, which I didn't even know was the brother to him until like many years after Skyrim. I didn't look at their names or anything, but Yeah, like that. You never hear him talk about their son that's actually the Thane. Like, this guy only ever talks to his son at the bar or about his dead daughter. You never hear him reference, as far as I know, their son, who is the house carl to the Jarl of Riften for the Stormcloaks. But they're there anyway, and you can kind of see she's given some side eye over to Riften, and the whole the whole irony of it is that he hates the Imperials, because I've always played an Imperial character, and you look at him and he goes, "What do you want, you Imperial bastard?" You know, he's quite vicious towards you. And the fact is his son is marrying an Imperial, and she's a female. Their kids will always be Imperials, and they'll also be related to the Emperor. So he doesn't just hate Imperials, but he hates the Empire. So it's a double whammy for this poor bastard. And of course, Nora, who's a priestess of Talos, she's just happy to be there for her son. You know, she's hoping for grandchildren. She's a sweet older lady. I don't think she gives a flying shit that her children are going to be her grandchildren are going to be Imperials. Yeah, she might want them to kind of believe in Talos, no doubt, since it's her religious belief. But whatever the hell. And this bastard who's smashing a wood elf. He's quite familiar and friendly with the mage, the court mage in Riften. So he's also into elven women. So I don't think any of the boys. He wouldn't get Nord grandchildren anyway. He sees it. He's going to hate it. He's going to have Imperial grandchildren and friggin' Wood Elven grandchildren. This guy's getting fucking punched in the face 3 times over. And then, of course, you've got Maven Blackbriar. I mean, this woman is... I honestly think she's the most powerful person in all of Skyrim. She is. She even referenced that she could kill the Emperor if she wanted to. Oh, forgive my yawn. But she's got some serious balls, man. Like, I'm surprised she doesn't throw him over her shoulder like it's Santa's sack, because she is one boss-ass bitch. She really is. I mean, if someone becomes too much of a problem, Dark Brotherhood. If she wants to get rid of someone or steal their shit or hold something hostage to them or frame them, the Thieves Guild. She is ruthless. She is proper Game of Thrones sort of ruthless. Like, she's like Cersei Lannister, but she's not having sex with her brother, as far as I know. So, I really like Maven. She is just a proper badass bitch. And obviously there's a couple in the background. There's Balgruuf. Balgruuf was imprisoned by Sigurd, who was then broken out by Tofar, the Nightingale, as a Thieves Guild job, by Maven's request. And yeah, now he's back, and he's got a bit more hair since the last time we've seen him. He's been living in solitude since he was freed by Topher the Fox, or the Thieves Guild boss at the time. So there's quite a bit of story in that if you're not familiar with the story. And of course you've got Alasif, who a certain bloke called Carter, who's got his character in the story called Karsten, really wants her to be a redhead. I mean, he's always on my ass about this character being a redhead. He's like, turn her into a redhead, turn her a redhead, make this person redhead, make that person redhead. I was like, man, holy fuck, bro. You gotta calm down. I know you got a thing for redheads, mate, okay? I know, I'm a redhead myself, okay? I've got no soul too. And we go back to Balgruuf, and his daughter, of course, his guess is going to be his daughter who likes all the fancy shit, and then, spoiled child who wants to go see the wedding of this powerful woman and, rich woman and this fancy all this other shit and all this sort of thing. But he's kind of giving the side eye, not to the Dragonborn, but to Sigurd, because Sigurd's the one that put him on his knees in the fight for Whiterun, and she took control of Whiterun before winter arrived. So how long would that have been? It's summer now, so a good half a year at the moment. And Ragni's just listening to it all cook off by Sigurd, and then it clicks to their head. It's like, if I had Centaurus here, I'd be hearing the exact same shit, just on a different side of things. And she's quite wise. I've made Sigurd, like, Ragni quite compassionate, but also quite wise, but also got to keep it to her age group that she's also quite naive and impulsive. You can still be young and raised in the shit and still have a brain for things, but sometimes you might act of impulse or you're inexperienced in life itself and mess up. And I hope I've made her a perfect character for that, where there is definitely insight and compassion and love and care and wisdom within her, but there's also the sometimes her age and her youthfulness will shine through and kind of defeat the brains that she's summoned. And of course, a lot of that happens with, obviously, the very strange man that met her in the inn, that she knew she was a vampire, but went with the belief that maybe he wasn't a bad one because she believes they're not all bad right now and stuff like that. And the bride kisses the husband, the camera stops abruptly, which couldn't really control because they have one hand. And boom, the big names leave after the wedding. Some of them go back to their daily things, crap like that. And Ragni sticks around to thank. And she has a conversation with both sides. And of course, Victoria's mother hits her with the whole, you should definitely be a citizen of the Empire and help, the Emperor secure victory in Skyrim. Blah, blah, blah. Hits her with the political bullshit. She knows this is going to happen because no matter where she goes, if there's a head of power, they're always going to try to convince her to see their side in the war, secure the Skyrim for one side or the other. And the same thing happens over with the other side of the family. I mean, the father will basically be like, you should be a true daughter of Skyrim, you should go and join the fight, join Ulfric, blah, 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 blah. And she's used to that shit, and, she expects it's coming and all that sort of stuff. And she kind of references that in the story later on when she takes a page out of Minerva's book, which I really liked. Because Minerva, she didn't want to involve the college in the Civil War at all. So her simple statement to both the Stormcloaks and the Legion is that we're not here for your war. We're here to teach people that want to learn magic. That is what we're here for, to study and, acknowledgement of magic. That is all. And she kind of does the exact same thing at the dinner party later on when she's like, well, I'm not here for your war, I'm here to stop the dragons, that's the most important part, everything else doesn't really matter. Kind of like the political statement sort of thing, which is like a page out of Minerva's book. So she's learning from her group members, which is always good. Now before this, Ragni basically goes, Sigurd will be my guest at the party. Kind of Alice was like, no way, her king killed my husband. And she's like, well, okay, then I cannot come. And then obviously Alice kind of gives into it because Ragni's a dragonborn, so she's obviously going to play nice. And I wanted to really show here that Victoria was so comfortable in her husband's arms, even around his family, which was like the enemy to her cousin, that she felt more at home in his arms around his family than she did around her own mother. And I kind of expect that from a young Imperial, I don't think she's meant to be young, but from her being around a mother that lives in Cyrodiil that's very political and all this sort of stuff, to a young man that makes her feel like she's living her life, And I like that idea. I like that, she can feel comfortable in her husband's home around his family. It just feels a lot more, more alive in a way. And then, of course, like I said, Ragni is basically told to join her side. And she's like, fuck that, I'm not getting this conversation. I'll see you guys later. I'm so happy for your wedding. Thank you for inviting me. And she goes to deal with another matter at hand. The matter that's kind of under the crypt. Well, under the temple, in the crypt. She gets into some sort of dragon language here where she's talking about it. It sounds very stupid because obviously it's not a real language and the AI might not translate it completely properly. But she talks about the sort of thing that the Greybeards kind of reference in the background of like those that seek power are not deserving of it and those that do not wish to bear it are the ones that should, sort of thing, in the dragon language. And then obviously she comes down, Serana's waiting for it because, obviously Cecilia's like, Ragni's 100% going to come here and she should not, with Centaurus being recently turned, because we all know how sweet she smells. And, Serana's kind of sitting there waiting for her. She's also taking a bit of breath of fresh air, and that will be explained a lot in the next story. All that sort of good stuff, but basically, yes, it's Serana tells Ragni that she has successfully turned Centaurus into a vampire. You kind of see the sadness on Sigund's eyes, and then obviously Serana cracks her shits at Sigund because she's by her side again, even though she abandoned her. And a lot of their arguments in the last day or two have been because of Sigund and hurting her, punching her in the face, and this and that. And basically, Serana's like, dude, if you do that shit again, I promise you I will crush both of your hands. You'll never be able to hurt anybody ever again, nor will you be able to protect yourself. That sort of thing. And she basically told her up right, because she's a vampire, and vampires in my game, they fall to their lust. It's like, they're reversed. Everything is reversed for a vampire in sort of an unnatural way. So, again, their worst sort of feelings, their worst personalities come out to shine. Very much like if you watch the show Van Helsing on Netflix, how like vampires, when they become vampires, they become proper evil. And then they when one of them becomes human again, they're like disgusted by the monster they became. This way, kind of, with being around Ragni and falling in love with Ragni, she's obviously dodged a lot of what she is. She's given a lot more into the human side of who she was because of Ragni. So she's kind of very much dulled down her instincts, her power, her everything, because she wants to be a lot more human for Ragni than a bloodthirsty monster. Things like that. And that's kind of could explain to why she was so easily defeated, because she doesn't embrace what she is. She changes who she is for Ragni, and becomes a lot more of a, like, I mean, obviously, if this was back in the past, Sigurd wouldn't have made this far. She would have tore her head off and drank her blood and just let the body let her rot. But now she's forgiving Sigurd because Ragni wants her to, because Ragni loves her, and she's being very compassionate, which isn't a very good vampire thing. And she basically she promises her that she'll hurt her again, but she also goes, I'll protect yours if you protect mine. And Sigurd goes, deal, dude, 100%. You look after Centaurus, and I'll look after Ragni. And obviously she's made this oath to Ragni beforehand. We get to see a glimpse of Centaurus, sort of, I wanted to show him off. I wanted to show what he'd become, because I've been trying to tell the story for fucking months now. And even seeing a glimpse of him, I'm finally happy that I'm there. But yeah, it's dude, that's the next story I want to work on, because honestly, I don't know how I'm going to really cope with the whole Ragni thing, because honestly, dude, she got quite very well bullied. She got injured by the assassin's blades, and she got a soul and a heart ripped out with both Serana's death and Topher's death. But yeah, we get to see a bit more of Serana before, well, she's gone, unfortunately. Some of you don't like her, and so those that don't like her will be glad she's gone. But again, that's going to change the person that loved her the most, the person that gave her the will to fight, and that could very well, the character that you might have loved Ragni, you might not love what she becomes, because again, like I said, shock, grief, sadness, and hatred and anger. And anger is one letter of danger. So again, the dragon might come out to live a little bit longer. Things like that. So they have their little girls thing where basically they promise this and promise that, and they can't go any further because Centaurus is now a vampire, and they need to go. And obviously, Ragni's been invited to a dinner party at the Jarl's palace, and Sigurd will follow her and protect her, giving both her word to Ragni, and of course now Serana. So that's her idea, her plan. She made the vow to Centaurus, she made the vow to Ragni, and she's now made the vow to Serana. So she's quite serious on her intent to keep Ragni alive, protected, and well, and stuff like that. It's not just that, it's now Serana has the person that she loves in her hands and stuff like that. Anyway, we'll get on to the bit of the future story, because this is my longest story yet, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The first one being it leads into some big shit, but also I really, as a person creating the story, I really wanted to hold on to the Journeys of the Dragonborn for as long as I could before it all came burning down, because I like what I do. I like these characters. Obviously I'm my own biggest fan. You got to be, or your shit's gonna suck. But it's I really wanted to keep onto that idea of what the team was before it all changes and before it all goes to the shitter. I guess that sort of reaching out to grab onto one last time before they're gone forever, sort of thing. And that was the idea of it. Now, there might be a bit of a person change right in front of them, and honestly, I really want to hear what people's perspectives are that watch the Journeys of the Dragonborn first, and then watch the Contractor's story to kind of see all the stuff I left behind. Like, I don't know. I think personally, if you could bear the 2 hours of watching this shit, and then seeing everything else in the background play a part in what's happened with Ragni's story, it makes, I think, his story, or at least her story, so much better, knowing what plays in the background, and that background's right in front of their face right now. Obviously, when I first did the Contractor story all those months ago, he just took the role of an Imperial Legionary, but I really wanted to increase and expand upon his story in tenfold, and make him part of the Dragonborn story now that she was in Solitude. But yeah, it's I have a few background things that I always like to leaving around, especially in the conversation that follows when Sigurd and Ragni are talking, you can even see him watching them. Right there. I mean, I don't know if people would have picked that up, but as you can see, his face is quite pale and he's got red eyes. I mean, he's obviously listening to the conversation because, he can hear with his vampiric hearing that, that Sigurd's onto him and that something's wrong and that she's going to go tell the Legion. And he's watching them right now as they're talking about it. Yeah. So I thought I'd put that there. For those that were watching the Journeys of the Dragon before the contractor stuff, you might not even notice it or thought it was weird that his face was quite pale white and you can't really see, it's just kind of blur in the background, but his eyes were obviously red. And if you watched the contractor story after the Journeys of the Dragonborn, it would have made a lot more sense and that would have lit a few light bulbs in your head. I definitely could have at least had Ragni involve herself a lot more in the Bard's College because she was in solitude before she was a Dragonborn. As a Bard, she followed her sister's dream, but again, she just hasn't. She's more of a reclusive person. She keeps to the people she knows. She doesn't want too much air or this. Like she doesn't like all the attention. That might be the most unrealistic thing about my story. She's a quiet person. She doesn't want all the yada-da hanging around her, especially the bards that they found out that one of their bards had become the Dragonborn and things like that. So I don't know. I probably missed out a bit of that with her going to the Bard's College, but again, it kind of suits her character because she's not too much into that. And I really wanted to turn this camera around, look at the beautiful sunset because it's kind of like the last sunset before everything changes. The sun washes over your face, and you see this beautiful sort of view of nature itself, and then the next morning it's all gone to hell sort of thing. That's kind of why I dragged the story on. I wanted to feel like your typical normal Journeys of the Dragonborn story, and then it kind of goes into a very beautiful, happy time moment, the wedding, and then it all goes crashing down. Now, I did realise, while that fight in Morthal was happening, the only housecarl that wasn't there was actually Jordis, and that's simply because I forgot her. And so I put it into the story that she went to protect Centauros, and I got to remember to put her into that story. So the next one, she'll show up in it. She didn't follow the Dragonborn into Morthal because she was protecting her lord, because he was quite unwell, and she found out what was happening to him, and she would not leave his side, and that's why Lydia and Ionia, that's a League of Legends thing. Iona or something like that followed her into Morthal, and Iona died. So it kind of explains, into why she wasn't with Ragni when she was sworn to protect and follow Ragni. She kind of kept and followed her lord instead of, her lord's plan. Things like that. And that's kind of the reason I have her here, to kind of fix up the things I keep forgetting. I'm getting old. Now, at the dinner party, you can see some familiar faces from the wedding, and we also see, well, when we get to it, we see Karsten. Now, Karsten is, like I said, he's a fan-made character from one of the blokes that always sort of... he's the one that hounded me for redheads. And he's on YouTube as Carter. And he's here too for a certain reason, of course, because he is the son of, I forgot his name, but he's the guy that takes the position of Jarl of Windhelm for the Imperial victory. And of course, he's in the Legion, and the Imperial Jarls, they want someone they can trust to run Windhelm, and Ulfric's head is rolling around the floor, and he's obviously doesn't want anything to do with the war, and he's refusing to, to reply to their messages or anything like that. And they need their son to butter him up. So basically, Maven is kind of at the head of it, but they need a pretty young face, and that is obviously Alicif right there, that could maybe convince him to convince his father when the time comes that, that Ulfric, when he's dead, it might be wise for him to take control, because both the Dark Elves and the Nords respect him, and he'd be better for the future of Skyrim as Windhelm's Jarl. Eventually making, Torvid right here. Sorry, not Torvid, fucking Karsten, my god, who am I thinking of? I'm thinking of Torvid the Wolf. That's a different character. Dude, that's why they look alike. It's my old companion's character. And he might even become the Jarl of Windhelm himself in the future, being the son of the Jarls. and obviously being quite familiar and friendly with a certain Jarl of Solitude, it could make him a certain potential for like a vassal king or something like that in the future, you know? There's just ideas. They're just ideas that are floating around my head. And of course, you got Maven around here trying to, like, you know, convince him with her sort of power struggle and stuff like that. And she even, like, you know, they talk about Centaurus, how he's both a Thane of both Solitude and the Rift. And, you know, Maven shows her power play by referencing how he became a Thane of Solitude, because she knows what happened. She's got ears and eyes absolutely everywhere, and she knows what Centaurus did for Alicif when it comes to her husband and the Thalmor and that sort of thing. And she just kind of shows how powerfully dangerous she is with the knowledge that she knows. You know, it shows that she's the lioness at the table, everyone else is a cub, and sort of thing. You know, like, everyone around the table obviously respects and wants to be her, especially Erica, because he's very similar in regards that, you know, Riften, he's both the head of Solitude's Thieves Guild alignment, and she is obviously the head of Riften's Thieves Guild alignment. So they're actually quite entwined in a way. A certain character that's obviously skulking around Solitude right now. But as we know, basically Carsten came into Solitude to inform the General that the Imperial Legion never arrived, to see if they were going or not. And after that he was going to go back to Morthal to gather his troops and protect the town, but he was then ordered by the General to attend the dinner party of the Jarl. And this is the reason, because maybe these Jarls can convince him to convince his father, for the sake of the Legion, for the sake of the Empire, to basically take the mantle of Jarl. And that's essentially why he's there. He's been ordered to stay to talk to the Jarls. I mean, the General probably could have asked him to basically ask his father for him, and he would have had a much better result, like, instead of having two Jarls try and convince him. Other than that, I think I'm going to skip into Sigund's part, because that's a pretty big part of her having to walk into Castle Dour as a Stormcloak soldier. Sigund's been told to wait, you know, and that's what she has to do, because there's no doubt they have to clean up their battle plans and hide that shit away to find out what a Stormcloak wants, going into Castle Dour, the HQ of the Imperial Legion. And this is kind of where I switch back into different saves, because obviously I'm telling a story of something I've already done. Like 8 or 9 months ago I did this for the story of the contractor before I had to redo it. She waits until night time and the shift change ends. Obviously it changes because we're going back into a save that's like 9 months old. It makes sense that they change over, because quite simply, I mean, daytime, nighttime shift, different people, things like that. But this right here is kind of the point to where I go back to a save that's like half the time of what I've had it. So I think I'm at 800 hours in my current one. It could be more. And this one is like 300 hours. But I essentially did this so we have the music in the background, so we can have the wedding reception after the wedding was done. You know, the groom, or so the husband and the wife are out drinking, and they're all, you know, she's having her conversations, and the guests are there, and there's the reception. You can hear it in the background while Sigund's walking into, you know, the palace, essentially. And that's kind of just what I wanted to really show. Sigund walks in and finds Marilia Tullius, like the lapdog she is, by the general's side. And, you know, obviously they've got some beef with their history. And Tullius is straight to the point. He's like, what do you want? Why have you come here to see me? Is it because you've obviously you see the Emperor as your truthfully rightful leader? And she's like, Skeever's ass I am. And typical response from Sigund, you know, I don't know what they expected. Especially when she walks in wearing the colours of the Stormcloaks. And Marilia pipes up and has a bit of a bark. And Sigund straight up, she's like, dude, the next time we meet out in the wilds, I'm killing you. You know, if Brianna was on to beat you, you stand no chance against me. And then obviously, you know, she pipes up going, threatening an Imperial officer is a crime against the Empire. Maybe a few nights in the Imperial jails will help you. And, you know, and she referenced the same cell that her sister was put in, which was tortured and raped by the Imperial Legion. And all this sort of stuff. Another little hissy fight, you know, and then basically the general cuts in. He's like, enough of this bullshit. Probably should have said enough lollygagging. And this sort of stuff. And he asks her to get straight to the point. Now, obviously, she's here not to convert over, but to warn them of a pending threat she's got deep in her guts. And we've all known with all these stories that I do that every one of these companions of the Dragonborns, they get weird feelings for each other, but also bad feelings on certain things. And they turn out to be true. She's walked into the general's, basically, command room to warn him of a threat, and then obviously the Empire doesn't take much heed to it. You know, especially with the wedding going on, they don't want to scare Victoria Vici during her wedding day because it could piss the Emperor off. You know, this is a family member, this is a blood relative of the Emperor. So they don't want to overly, scare her, and obviously they're not going to be jumping out of their shoes to listen to a Stormcloak's bad feelings about something. Tullius understands that she takes a lot of risk walking in here, saying what she says, but at the same time, it's Stormcloak. They're not going to go unsettling the city. Tullius, on the other hand, is wondering why this vampire is taking some blood, this and that, and he's got questions, and Sigurd wasn't preparing for him, and she's like, not my business, and he's kind of hot on the heels to what's going on. He's got an idea of what's going on. I mean, he is the general. He's got his source of weapons is information, and she kind of blunders, and he's like, dude, you're lying to me. Like, you're actually lying to me. But I'll get to the bottom of this. Don't you worry. And essentially, once Sigurd warns him of what could be happening with the stolen blood, he's like, alright, Leggett, go and send 2 men to have a look. Blah, blah, blah. And she gets angry at him for not taking the threat seriously. And it wouldn't matter anyway, because that man in the inn is gone. He's replaced himself with, well, a certain member of a certain organisation that she's already had a conversation with at the temple. So it doesn't go too well for her. I mean, she puts the neck out in the line to basically warn the Imperials of a great threat, and they undertone it, of course, doing what they do best. There's the reason that a Stormcloak's talking about it, and that, well, rather important wedding's on for a rather important person they do not want to scare and upset. We get back to the party maybe a couple hours later, and Ragni's digging in with her bare hands. I mean, obviously there's no plate-eating animations in Skyrim, which kind of suck, so I thought it'd be kind of funny, because she grew up in the country, and eating with her bare hands being starving, that she doesn't pay much attention to where she is and the kind of people she's with, and they all look at her eating chicken with her bare hands and like, what the shit? You've got a knife and fork in front of you, why aren't you using it? It's kind of barbaric, and she doesn't really realise that, of course, because she's hungry, and like I said, she grew up out in the Morthal Marsh, basically, as a farm girl. And I also reference that it's not just with food, like physical food you can eat, but she mentions it with spoons and soup, because I understand that. I mean, like, if you're thirsty, man, or you want some soup, sometimes you live in colder climates, especially like a cold climate like Skyrim, your soup's not going to remain warm forever, and cold soup is shithouse. So you're obviously going to want to get as much as you can, as hot as you can get it, to keep your body warm. And using a spoon just might not cut it for the time you have for it to go cold, so you just slurp it down from the bowl, and you're good to go. But yeah, I didn't really want to go for another 10-minute conversation between all the Jarls and shit like that, so I wanted to kind of briefly cut through it all. Things like that, especially Erica. That Erica basically tries to flirt with her and tries to get it back to his place, like the sleazebag he is. And he forgets that he's met Ragni at the Thalmor party. And have a big hustle-tussle there with that. They have a bit, he calls her a liar and says that she could be a bedtime companion of his, which, pisses everyone off. And then Alyssif kind of stands up at her own table and kind of puts him in his place. Because none of these Thanes are her own. Unless, well, the only Thane that is her own is actually Centauros, but he's not at the table here. The rest of them are either from, her husband, but mostly from her husband's father, the previous king of Skyrim. So she actually stands up at her own table this time, really puts Erica in his place when he really plays up, when he insults the Dragonborn. She's like, no, dude, if you want to remain a Thane, and if you want to keep your head on your shoulders, you will leave this party at once. This is really where she puts the foot down. Alyssif's kind of seen throughout Skyrim as more of a puppet, Jarl. She's just the wife of the High King. She's been put there to be, and there's so much cut content with her. I mean, If she's murdered, Erica takes her place as Imperial Jarl of Skyrim in the cut content. And even more cut content, or planned content, where if the Empire lost Solitude to the Stormcloak Rebellion, that Brawling would become the Thane the Jarl of Solitude, because she's actually quite sympathetic to him. If you hear her conversations between her and the other Jarls and other people in the court, you'll actually hear that she kind of talks about him quite a bit, but she doesn't hate him, she kind of respects him, or she kind of understands why they're fighting, and it makes sense why she would become the Jarl of Solitude, the Stormcloak Victory. But again, I mean, even Carsten right here is like, dude, you're talking mad shit about the Dragonborn, and he was going to jump over the table and really put his teeth between the table and kind of table stomp him, thing like that. Yeah, it was. I just really want to put that moment there because, I mean, in that story where she goes to the Thalmor party, she really gets to see what Erica truly is, and he's an absolute grub. And it's the only time, I think, in Elder Scrolls history that they've actually used a very profaned word, because obviously you don't get swearing in this game. You don't hear people saying fuck or shit or other words like that, especially an Australian favourite which starts with a good letter that ends with unt. But no, he actually calls her a slut in that story. He used the word slut, which is the first time for Bethesda. But yeah, so we had the whole entire, confrontation with the germ bag. She then overhears and listens to the others on the left side, which are like the court members, like the steward, the mage, and one of the other things, and she notices that Sabine is also a vampire. Because, like I said, Ragnar was a previous vampire hunter. She learned all the tricks and traits of vampires and stuff like that. And the fangs are kind of a dead giveaway. And she just overhears the other side of the table. She just listens to him. She listens to Brawling, understanding that she is also very compassionate or understanding of the Stormcloak Rebellion. And she looks at the way both Brawling and Folk Firebeard kind of look at each other. But it kind of reflects on her that vampires are a core part of her life, that are a big part of her life. There is them killing her family, destroying her life, her hunting them, falling in love with one, having one as her close friend, a kind of mother figure, saving someone she loves by becoming a vampire, and soon losing someone she loves because of a vampire. And I mean, it really comes down to it. I mean, vampires, especially becoming a vampire, I forgot that one. There's so much about her life which is heavily involved with vampires. I mean, she is pretty much the dusk and the dawn. She's the bridge between the light and the dark, Essentially is what she is. She's the light bringer, more the darkness. Well, at least she was. Like I mentioned before, Maven was like, alright, well, you should definitely, join the Empire sort of thing. She went for the whole political attack, what side do you join? Hopefully it's the Empire, bring prosperity and order back to Skyrim, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, Ragni knew that was coming, and she was saved by Bryling, who, come to tell her that Sigurd had arrived, and she'd kind of forgotten about how hungry she was, because she never turned up being her guest. And it was a perfect chance for her to get the hell out of Dodge, and, she'd eaten, she had drank as much as she could, and she was now getting asked questions she didn't want to bloody answer, or get, asked all the time. And it was time to go and see Sigurd and find out where the hell she's been for so goddamn long. Now this bit's a really big bit right here. I mean, she's had a wonderful day. She's drunk a little bit probably, and she's obviously, her belly's full, and she goes to find out what Sigurd's done, and Sigurd has gone and spoken to the Empire, but they haven't given a flying shit about it at all, which has kind of really annoyed Sigurd. But Sigurd is still heavily on the case of like, I haven't got a good feeling about this at all. And Ragni's like, oh, well, rightio, fair enough. And she's playing it down because maybe it's because she's drunk, or it's because she's just had a wonderful night. I mean, a lot of the dread she faces has kind of just been kind of buried by the beautiful day of the wedding and the party and the celebrations and just the goodness of it all, the hopeful nature of it all. And she's like, well, I've had enough to eat, I've got to go. And Sigurd's like, all right, I'll follow you back to the inn, let's get going. And, you know, she swore to protect her, both from Centauros, with herself, with Serana, and of course the Ragni. She promised 4 people, which is including herself. And, you know, Ragni's like, I don't really want to. Maybe I'm hopeful that Serana might turn up and I can talk to her, or I can just have a beautiful night back to the inn and go to sleep, because I'm absolutely, like, full. You ever eaten too much, you get a food coma? Pretty much that's what Ragni's got. She just wants to walk a bit of it off, to sweat a bit of the alcohol out of her, and to kind of burp a little to get some room in her guts, and get back to the inn and go to sleep. And Sigurd's like, no, dude, I'm going to protect you. And then Ragni's like, no, I'm the Dragonborn. You gave me your oath. You would do what you're told. Now do it. And, you know, she had to really try and convince Sigurd not to stick to her like a fly, pretty much. And she was like, oh, by the way, go get some food. And Sigurd's like, no way, dude, they're Imperial Jarl. I'm not sitting with those goddamn traitors. And then she mentioned Carsten. Now, Carsten had a bit of a story. They grew up together. That was kind of their first love interest as young adults. They were, you know, they were lovers back in the day before Sigurd went to go join the Stormcloaks, and Carsten did not. He stayed in Windhelm, fell in love with another person. She got killed. Story goes on, but they knew each other. And she's a bit confused why Carsten's there. And then Ragnar kind of spells out what the Imperials are trying to do. And that kind of pisses off Sigurd a bit. They're trying to replace Ulfric before he's even fucking dead. And that kind of changes their focus onto that. She's like, I'm going to go and relieve myself, quotation marks. Go and eat some food, drink some drink, and save Carsten. Because if you're around him, they will not ask such stupid questions around a Stormcloak. And after they've grown tired of your presence, they'll no doubt want to cancel the party. And then you've had your feed, you've had your drinks, you've saved Carsten. Come back to me then, but I'm going on my own. And Sigurd's like, alright, well, take Minerva's goddamn Daedra. And she's like, fine, I'll take Minerva's Daedra, just to shut her up and move her out and stuff like that, to kind of just convince Sigurd to not follow her around the entire time like a bodyguard. Because we've known with Ragnar, she's got this impulsive nature to where she doesn't want to be bodyguarded all the time. You know, still, she wants a bit of her freedom, she wants a bit of her herself, you know? And that obviously shows right now, and you could say that could be a very personal thing or a very impulsive thing. But maybe in the long run, it saves Sigurd's life, because I don't think Sigurd, if the Nightingale from the Shadows couldn't defeat the Contractor, and especially Serana, I don't think Sigurd would have stood a chance, especially being so opposed to the man in the inn, that the Contractor would have absolutely enjoyed killing her for basically trying to rat him out or trying to catch him, stuff like that. So in the long run, I think Ragni has saved Sigurd's life by forcing her to stay back, by being impulsive. Yeah, I like to think that maybe this act of like wanting to be on your own has kind of saved Sigurd's life, because I don't think she'd been anywhere near powerful enough to stop something that had just become a vampire lord that was giving completely into the power and all that sort of stuff. We get to the long walk back to the reality of fate. The reason I made this story so long is because I personally wanted to hold on to what I'd created for the last, like, 20 episodes, I guess. That's sort of, you know, there's sort of the fellowship of the Dragonborn before it all breaks apart and, you know, things change. And, you know, I just really, you know, that's the sole reason why I went for so long. I could have probably cut this into like 3 episodes, but I just really kind of wanted to hold on to it as long as I possibly could, of Ragni having a walk, to kind of thinking about her life and thinking about Centauros. And right here, she's, you know, imagining that he's probably out there right now, out in the wilds of Sicilia and Serana and things like that. And then she's walking back. She takes a left up here to kind of go back to the inn, but she finds something sort of, you know, she finds something that looks like a body, and she walks over to it and she realizes that it's Victoria's mother dead, and she shits bricks kind of, and doesn't realize she can't hear the music anymore, or that the reception sounds silent, and she gets up and she finds bodies everywhere. You know, everyone's been slaughtered. Yeah, like there's just dead people absolutely everywhere. And, you know, she looks around before she ends up finding somebody quite close to her is also amongst the bodies. And that is Topher the fox, the Nightingale, headless and gutted like a pig. around all the blood, and it's just this entire day, this entire thing of hope has just crashed down around her, and maybe what Sigurd said was true, that that her bad feeling was quite on point, especially when Ragni herself has had a lot of those feelings. Before long, she's attacked by an assassin, she's brought down to her knees, and she's kind of begging Darks, why did you kill my friend? Why did you kill Topher? And he's like, oh, that was her name. Rightio. He kind of mocks him a little bit, but he doesn't really mock Topher. He's like, she died pretty easily, but if she stayed in the shadows, she still could be alive. Possibly, but she's not, and Ragni's been wounded by the effects, and she's absolutely heartbroken by what's happened to her dear friend Topher, without realising the worst of it is yet to come, while the assassin sits there talking about this and that, and being the dark bastard that he is, that he slaughtered, her and for the wedding, and that he was an assassin before revealing, kind of taking away his mask. And again, there's a certain point where, Ragni's looking at him, but then she realises, something's not right. And you'll see it in this image real soon, where her eyes light up right there, where she realises that someone's sword is on his back. That's a sword that should not be on his back, because she's meant to be with Centauros. And he explains that he killed her, that he'd killed the vampire that come to defend the legionaries here, that come to defend the wedding, that gave him his power. And then he reveals that she's also now in that fireplace, that she's now ash, and the shock on Ragni's face is that it's the first real stage of grief. It's the shock of it all, not really believing it. And they're refusing to believe it, because again, in her head, in her heart, she's with Centauros, and she's like, no, it can't be true, it cannot be true. And then she searches her heart, and she realizes that she can't feel Serana anymore, and she knows it's real, she knows it's true, but she still can't believe it. But it rips out her heart. So her soul was first taken out of Topher's death, and then her heart with Serana's, and she knows that it can't be a lie, because that blade is Serana's, and it was with Serana, when they talked, when they chatted, and now it's with him. And she knows deep down that the woman she loves, the woman that gave her the will to fight, the woman that taught her a lot, has just died. I get a lot of comments that Serana died quite easily, like an NPC, but there's a reason for that. It's because I can't have them exactly fight toe to toe. I can't have them fight the way that I play. So if I was to switch into Serana's perspective, the contractor as an AI is going to fight differently the way that I'd fight as him. So it wouldn't actually work out as a mirrored version. And two, that kind of he's fully willing and giving into his power as what he is, where Serana, like I mentioned before, has not. She's kind of shied away from it because of Ragni, which has made her weaker. And there's also another reason, which I'll get into in the next story. But it's, you can hear a bit of the dragon roaring out from this, how she's going to find him, she's going to kill him, and she's going to burn him down. And then she looks at Topher, and she kind of just faints, ending the story of Journeys of the Dragonborn. Now, with this, I have an idea, and that is to create a brand new series, one that kind of, have a different name, a bit like a season 2, I guess you could say. I don't know how long these will go for. I have no idea. All this shit started because of Centauros getting put on his knees. So, that was wild. That's that story itself. I don't remember what episode that was, like 15 or 16 or 14. One of those had crafted an everlasting story that's gotten us this far. And I think a new name for maybe, like, instead of Journeys of the Dragonborn, is the path of the Doom Driven. Because she is doom driven. Everyone who loves her suffers, like that song. Love is the price to pay for my destiny. And I think doom driven being a word for that, it's just an Elder Scrolls word for those that are created by the Elder Scrolls, that can write their own stories, and obviously one that is doomed to lose the people they love. And there was obviously the Fellowship of the Dragonborn, because now the team's all split up. Minerva and Tonraq are in Morthal. Cecilia has gone off with Centauros. Sigurd was forced to stay behind. Topher was killed. Freya was greatly injured. The entire team, the dynamic of the Journeys of the Dragonborn, those that followed her, have all been broken up one way or another. left her exposed on her own due to her own actions, some of it may be her own actions, basically like this. But yeah, I would definitely want to do one more story, which might start the new story and end the last story, a bit like Cecilia's prequel sequel, the very first chapter that started off the entire story, with a new name, and that will be obviously through Centaurus' perspective. So we'll see a little bit more of Serana, a little bit more, before her destined dance with death. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed. I will soon make a contractor into my head sort of thing of the last episode, of the last chapter, because it's kind of cool to get back to the chapters. And I'll explain a lot more about that in that video. But I hope you guys have enjoyed. Let me know what you think. Got any ideas, this and that? I'd like to hear it. And I'll catch you guys in the comments of the next video. Catches.